salt and health I will try to highlight today. The World Action on Salt and Health was started. The WASH is an organization which was started in the UK in 2005. And it was started to mainly educate again, implement programs for reducing salt. And I will explain to you why it is required. And of course, our foundation has been active since 2010. For the last 16 years, we have been campaigning against salt, high salt intake, rather, not salt, high salt intake. And how do I?
Sir, you will.
Okay. So, which is the commonest killer in the world? I'm sure all of you would know. Hypertension and its complications. Heart attack, strokes and kidney failure. So high blood pressure. This is a figure given by WHO 5 years back. Today, now it has gone to 11 million people. Every year, 11 million people die due to hypertension and its complications. So it's a the number one killer in the world. So let's look at how do we combat this. Next. So what puts up the blood pressure? If I ask, wherever I go, I take a lecture, I ask them, what do you think is the cause of high blood pressure? The first thing they come out and tell me is stress. It's not stress. Stress it raises the blood pressure transiently. Again, it comes down. Several studies have been done where stress does not produce sustained high blood pressure. What is most important to produce high blood pressure is the salt intake. Now, when you take salt, it goes into the blood. It attracts water. It's an osmotic substance. Those who know chemistry, physics, you will appreciate that the salt attracts the water and the blood volume increases. When the blood volume increases, the blood pressure will go up unless the blood vessel dilates. The blood vessel normally dilates when the blood volume goes up. That's why our blood pressure is normal, irrespective of different salt intake. But this process called autoregulation fails. It doesn't always happen, and not only that, it varies from person to person. So that's called salt sensitivity. You cannot ask, I am eating so much salt, he is eating so much salt, same amount. Why he has got hypertension, I don't have? Because the sensitivity is different. So the salt sensitivity, it is called, varies in a population. So the number one reason for hypertension in a population is salt intake. Of course, I forgot to tell you, the incidence of hypertension is 35% of the population in India, in the adult population. 1 in 3 adults have high blood pressure. This is with a definition of 140 by 90. In between, US had put a guideline saying that 130 by 80 should be considered, above that should be considered hypertension. In that case, 50% of the population become hypertensive. So now between 130 to 140 is considered pre-hypertension. More than 140-90 is hypertension. So the number one cause is salt intake. Salt is sodium chloride or common salt. Now, the opposite action is potassium. Potassium is present in vegetables, fruits, etc. So potassium has an opposite action on the blood vessels. So if you don't take sufficient vegetables and fruits, again your blood pressure. So it has the opposite action. So lack of potassium intake. Then weight. If you are overweight, your blood pressure is more. Lack of exercise obviously follows there, and alcohol excess. So all of them are important causes of high blood pressure. Stress is not so important as it is perceived. Stress produces more of tension rather than hypertension. So it is different. So people get agitated with stress. That's a different matter. Next. It's a very ancient substance, salt. It was described in those days, food had to be preserved only in salt. So if you hunt in summer months, how do we get food for winter? The fish was stored in a salt solution. That is called brine. So that's how salt was realized as a preservative. If you are the normal housewife knows, if you prepare sambar without salt, by evening it will get spoiled. It gets fermented. The bacteria grow. So if you add salt, it's the best preservative. So salt is the best preservative. So it kills the bacteria. Colgate advertises our toothpaste contains salt because it kills bacteria. So salt can kill bacteria. So it's a very ancient substance. It was actually the Romans used to give it as a salary. The word salary salt came from salary. It was used as salary. It was so important. So they were given sacks of salt for their work. So it was used as a currency and this thing. Best food pill. Even now, the best food pill, in spite of refrigeration, vacuum packing, everything, still salt continues to be salt or other sodium salts continue to be important preservatives. Right? There is sufficient evidence, more than sufficient. Several studies, more than 50 studies which have shown that I am sure by this time everybody knows. I was just discussing with your MD that everybody knows if you have high blood pressure you should reduce salt. At least that much of awareness has been created. What they don't know is that even if you have normal blood pressure you have to eat less salt. That is the more important part which I am going to highlight today. So epidemic, there are several studies. Intervention studies have been done. You have reduced the salt in the population and shown that the blood pressure drops. Genetic mechanisms, which I told you, sensitivity to salt. One person with salt, blood pressure goes up, another person it does not go. Animal experiments, chimpanzees. I was just telling him, chimpanzees in the wild have a blood pressure of 90/60. So they were caught, put in the New York Zoo, and they were given, and in the wild you have no salt available. And they were put in the New York Zoo and given human food. In 6 months the blood pressure was 140/90. So that much it can go up. So chimpanzee studies. Of course treatment, again reducing salt, diuretics, lower the blood pressure. Death rates are more in those people who take salt. What is interesting is salt damages the lining of the blood vessel, what is called endothelium, even without the BP going up. So don't think just because your blood pressure is normal you can take more salt. It's a misconcept. Somebody thinks, oh my blood pressure is only 100/60, I should take more salt. That's wrong. That's why a lot of heart attacks, strokes and kidney failure happen even in the absence of high blood pressure. So it damages the lining of the blood vessel, the sodium. So the population studies, I'll come to it later, Japan and Finland, they were the first ones to implement salt reduction program. Next. He is the South American tribal man who is never exposed to salt. He eats only natural food. His average blood pressure is only 90/60. And he has more stress than us. He is always stressed by animals or predators killing him, so he has to take care round the clock. And still his blood pressure is only 90/60. They don't have strokes, heart attacks, they die of other reasons. Actually violence, that's different. They are still the South American tribals have been studied. Next one. The chimpanzees, I told you. The chimpanzees are the closest to the human beings. So you find that the blood pressure goes up once you give the human food. In the nature, the blood pressure is quite low. So in the ancient, probably the man also had a blood pressure of 90/60. Over generations we have been eating salt. What started as a preservative is now become a taste enhancer. That is the problem. Preservative techniques are still available, but it's cheap at best. See, the food manufacturer, they are the biggest culprit. I'll come to it later. They are not ready to take other forms of preservation because they are more expensive. And the shelf life will drop. They will have a shelf, nobody wants a shelf life of 1 month. You want a shelf life of 6 months. If the chips are made, it should last for 6 months. You have to put more salt. Otherwise the chips will get spoiled. You know pickles. People who prepare pickles know very well. If you add more salt, the pickle will go for 1 year. Avocado. But if you don't add salt, next day it is gone. Next one. So what is the salt intake in Indians? See, for such a large population of 140 crores, we have very few studies that have been done. About 1,500, maximum 3,000 people who have been studied. But the average intake that we have found is between 8 to 10 grams, the newer studies, but previously about 10 to 15 grams per day. This is based on how the study is done in several ways. The study, you take a questionnaire where you can find out, that is the least sensitive way. Or you have surveys, find out how much salt is bought in the family and then divided by the number of persons and number of days. These are all crude ways. The gold standard way is to do the 24 hours urine sodium. Salt is sodium chloride. So if you estimate, a simple test is there, where you collect the urine for 24 hours and see what is the sodium. See, in a steady state, whatever salt you take goes only in the urine. Hardly anything goes in the sweat. So I'll come to that later about the myth that if you sweat more, you have to take more salt. So the sweat doesn't contain so much of salt, it contains very less. Same way, motion doesn't contain much salt. So predominantly whatever you eat is removed in the urine. So that's why if you do a urine test, I can find out how much salt you have taken the previous whole 24 hours. So you find that in India, we are already taking almost 10 grams of salt per day. Next one. So what is the source of salt? The source of salt is present in natural food. So vegetables, fruits, everything contains sodium. Meat, whatever you eat, it contains sodium, small quantity. About 1 gram, maximum 2 grams of salt comes in a natural food. You add while cooking. So you add while cooking. So this differs with the cultural practice. For example, it is very surprising. You will think that normally a villager should not have high blood pressure. But in villages, what happens is they don't eat so much vegetables. They cook the rice with salt. So even same way the chapati atta is prepared with salt. So you don't require much of vegetables to eat with. So salt is added while cooking, even in rice and chapatis, etc. in the villages. So even in cities. So salt is added during cooking. This will vary with the cultural practice. And the first one cannot be removed. Natural salt is always there and it is required for us. 1 to 2 grams is required for us. It's a must. So added while cooking again varies with practice. Most important which we are now facing is the consumption of processed or packed foods. This is going up. A family, average family, both husband and wife are working, and you find that like in the US or in Western countries, packed foods are now available. A lot of people don't know that simple. I was traveling last time in the Vande Bharat. I found that the meal that provided the snacks, it crosses your daily allowance of salt. One meal itself. So much of salt is there because they are all prepared packed foods. So when you eat, for example, instant noodles, the highest salt is present in instant noodles. So you find packed foods is an important cause. Next. So certain myths are there regarding salt. That salt is a must for tasty food. This is not true. See, salt and sugar have the dominant taste. If you take salt, if you increase salt, your taste buds get saturated. You require more salt to get the salty taste. If you stop salt for 2 weeks, then you will start appreciating low salt also. So it is the taste buds get saturated by salt. So what you require is to eat less salt and get used to it. Then you will start feeling, oh, this is more salt. Sugar again is a dominant taste. If you put salt or sugar, other tastes like bitterness, sourness, chili taste, etc. are gone. So what will be on top is this. The French chef, if you go to the menu card in France or any of the Western countries, you will find all the 6 ingredients, 7 ingredients mentioned. This flower, this leaf, that, this and all. How do you get the flavor? If you add salt, all the flavor will be killed. If you ask for an extra salt, the French chef will get angry. He thinks my cooking is bad. Why do you want to add salt? So if your cooking is bad, you add more salt to conceal. If your cooking is good, you can bring out the flavors only when you add less salt. Of course, Japan has come out with a spoon. This spoon gives the taste of salt without containing salt. It gives electrical stimulation. It stimulates the taste buds. So when they eat the noodle or the rice, etc., they get a salty taste without adding salt. Because Japan is always in the forefront for reducing salt intake. Salt substitutes are safe. Again, there is a confusion regarding the salt substitutes. In India, you have certain salt substitutes which are not true. The so-called pink salt, Seda Namak, rock salt, Hindupu, etc. They all contain still sodium chloride. What is the culprit in salt is the sodium, not the chloride. Normally, the sodium is responsible for the hypertension and its complications. So all these salt substitutes, so-called, they still contain sodium in almost 90 to 95%. They have been analyzed. So they are not truly required for lowering the blood pressure. What is the true salt substitute is low sodium salt substitute. That means instead of the sodium, it is replaced by potassium. Now you find in the market certain low salts are available, like the Tata Light, Super Light, ITC has one. There are about 4 or 5 brands available now in the market, which potassium chloride replaces up to 20%. You can't replace much. You can replace up to 20%. So these are salt substitutes. Another myth we have in India is children require salt. Children don't require salt. Actually, in the UK, in schools, food is served without salt. In the first year of life, child should not be given any salt. If you are going to give salt as a child, in future this person is going to get high blood pressure. So the seed has been sown for your high blood pressure in the first few years of life. Unfortunately, in India, still the grandmother gives the dal rice with salt right in the first year of life. So salt intake in children is very important. Only by the age of 12, they should reach the adult intake. More salt is required in hot weather. Again, I mentioned about it. The sweat doesn't contain so much of salt. Once you are acclimatized, the sweat contains only water. So it's not. If your sweat is tasting salty, it means you are taking more salt. So it's not that you lose. So if you are going to sweat, you require more water, not more salt. Next. So what does WHO recommend? WHO recommends 5 grams of salt from all sources. Natural food, salt added during cooking, and what is preserved in preserved food. We are eating 10 to 15 grams. At least twice we are eating what is recommended by the WHO. So the recommendation is only 5 grams. This is for sodium chloride. Now you will find there is a small confusion which I will cover later, is sodium. What is sodium? What is sodium chloride? Sodium chloride is the compound, salt. Whereas sodium is the part which is responsible for the hypertension. So if you take the chemistry, sodium chloride, 2.5 times if you multiply and divide it, you will get the sodium. Because chloride has a different equivalent weight, sodium has different, so the molecular weight of sodium chloride, if you remove sodium, 1 gram of sodium is equivalent to 2.5 grams of salt. So what WHO recommends is 5 grams of salt or 2 grams of sodium. Why this is required for you to know? Not that, see, unfortunately the labels, food labels, mention as sodium instead of salt. In India, still it is mentioned as sodium and not as salt. Whereas in UK and Japan, it is mentioned as salt. It is very easy for you to understand. And lay people, I don't know why we have been writing it to the government, that already we have established that uppu or salt is related to hypertension. Why lose that ground? Now create a confusion as sodium. What lay people will understand what is sodium? So better to have it as salt, like what UK has or Japan has. Next one. So it's a myth. As I said, children slowly up to 12 months, no salt is virtually required. What is present in the natural food, 1 to 3 years, slowly you increase it, and by the age of 12 you reach the adult intake. Next one. So there are several ways of reducing the salt intake to 5 grams. So first you can do it gradually. You don't have to do it overnight, and you can avoid the salt shaker. Use other forms of spices, herbs, etc. to replace salt, and don't keep it. See the labels if it is possible. Sometimes washing the pickle or washing the salted item would also be helpful. So there are ways in which you could reduce or bring down your salt intake. Next one. Today's guide that we are going to launch gives you more in detail as to how to reduce the salt intake. So the biggest study came from the WASH in the UK, where they had a reduction of stroke by 24% and heart failure by 18% by reducing the salt intake to 5 to 6 grams. And UK was the world leader for that. And how did they achieve it? Very, very simple. See, the Englishman's staple food is bread. Breakfast is bread, lunch is bread, dinner is bread. So what they did was, they slowly reduced, the government reduced the salt intake in bread by 10% per year or 5% per year. So at the end of 5 years, the salt was reduced by 40%, but nobody knew that the salt has been reduced in the bread. They all thought that bread tastes the same. Now, even now, if you go to UK is the world leader for salt reduction in the world. You go there, you will find every item, as I said, is maintained in salt, and you will find that you're always low salt substitutes are available. So you want to buy a chip, there is a low sodium chip available. There is a low salt chip available. You want to buy a noodle, there is a low noodle. Like how we have for milk. You have a low fat milk, similar like that, there is a low salt substitute available in India. We don't have that. You want even to eat a snack, You have only one fixed combination. You don't have a lower substitute that is available for you to buy. Whereas in UK, you will right from the Heathrow airport, you will find everywhere low salt substitutes that are available. Next. Japan started in 1960 when they had strokes, and they were taking so much of salt at that time, 13.5, and they brought it down only by 2 grams, and you find there is a reduction in the blood pressure and strokes. Next. So what are they? It's not only just blood pressure. Salt has so many other complications. There is increased incidence of cancer stomach, stroke, I told you, even in the absence of blood pressure, heart failure, kidney disease, protein loss in the urine is related to high salt. Most interesting is kidney stones. Kidney stones happen because when you take more salt, the sodium while going in the urine drags the calcium, and the calcium forms a stone. So this is a big problem in the desert. You will find that in desert, they eat lot of salt because of the preserved food, and they don't drink sufficient water, and you will find that they eat red meat and they get stones. So when the calcium is drawn from the urine, it drags it from the bones. So you get osteoporosis. So you get weak bones if you take more salt. Even asthma is more common in those who take high salt. Next one. So who is responsible? Obviously all of us are responsible. Public. First we have to create an awareness that you should have the intention that I should eat less salt and know what are the complications of taking a high salt intake, and it's possible to have or enjoy your food with a low salt intake. This is the most important thing. The moment you start with a low salt, people feel that food will be tasteless, which is not true. So that's one. The government has to have some legislation. I'll come to it a little later on food labels. For example, you should have a label. Every food item, packed food item should have a label expressing in India. Sodium right now mentioned, salt is not mandatory. You will find protein, calories, you will find carbohydrates, trans fat, all are mentioned. They are all mandatory, but not sodium. Only some labels you will find sodium, and some you will not find sodium or salt. And of course the food industry. Food industry should look at different methods of preservation. The next one. This is the red label, which is there in UK. You don't have to know. How do I expect you to know how much salt to take and all? You cannot calculate. Very simple. If there is high salt, put a red label. So the government of India is considering stars, like the air conditioners and all. So they will put a 5-star label to say that the salt content is more. 1 star that the salt is low. So in UK they have a green. That means it's low salt. It applies for others also, fat, etc. Next. Skip this. So world action is being taken right now according to WHO. 92 countries are taking some form of action or the other to reduce the salt intake. Because WHO has said that we should all reduce in the world by 30% of the present salt intake. So it's high time that India also has such a regulation, and we have food labeling compulsory for salt. Next. Thank you.